what you say is, and type in chat boxes and things like that will be preserved in the recording. So, again, welcome to everybody. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Scott Wyckoff. I started working with George Lakoff about 3 years ago to try to do something more active in terms of framing. If you've read Lakoff's books, you get a grasp of framing, but putting it into practice are two different things. So one of the things that I want to cover tonight, and this webinar was set up through communication, actually a bunch of people and some groups about campaigns this year, and particularly local campaigns in communities that are maybe not served at their full potential by either the state party or a national party in terms of strategy for messaging and communications, which you all know is critical to winning elections. So by default, I'm going to presume that you have a basic knowledge of framing, so we're not going to get into specifics. We're going to jump right into how framing can help us win elections. And I'm going to walk you through a process where, first of all, we look at how campaigns are run in terms of messaging now, and why that's a problem, and how we can fix it. And then we're going to look at some really positive messaging that you can all use and adapt for your campaigns in local communities, and understand that this is the start of the conversation. This is a process. Nobody's going to get this right away, straight off, but as all of you know, I can be here as a resource to help you navigate those waters and things like that. We also have, since this is about campaigning, elections, we have a special guest tonight. This is playing Bob LaFollette. He's obviously was a genius at grassroots campaigning, so we'll have the spirit of fighting Bob with us tonight. So to start out, I want to do a quick poll here. And the way the polls work, for those of you, is I am able to open the poll, and it'll show up on your screen. This is a multiple choice. If you're with a group, just kind of get a consensus of the group. So I just want to get a sense of what your opinion is on what motivates and inspires people to vote for a candidate. And what is the biggest factor, in your opinion, of either is a candidate likable? Is that the most important? Is the candidate strong on facts and issues? Is it money? Is it the candidate being perceived as a moral leader? Or is it that the voter feels that they share the values of the candidate? So feel free to vote. People are voting now. We'll just take a minute. Nearly everybody's voted. We are 2/3 of the way there. And so, yes, and there we go. So we have all the votes are in, and overwhelmingly, I applaud all of you. Virtually everybody chose the shared values. In fact, 87% of the people voted shared values, and we had a couple responses about strong on fact issues. And by the time we're done tonight, you're going to see why facts and issues are important, but only if they are framed or presented in the proper context. Because there's something very important about facts and issues that people don't quite always get, which explains one of the reasons why people vote against their own self-interest. And as I said, this is a good illustration of how most progressives think. We change people's perception or change people's opinion on an issue. So that illustration shows this idea that progressives have that if you debunk a myth by replacing it with a factual alternative, that will change people's minds. Well, the problem is, and we're going to see this more tonight as we go through the presentation, but that ignores the science of thought, and it relies too heavily on people being rational. And I hope in your life experience that you understand that people don't make important decisions on reason. Important decisions are largely based on emotions, that is emotions that are unconscious, and other deeply seated biases, not rational decisions. And that's a fatal mistake that a lot of campaigns make. And obviously, we'll see more of that in a little bit. What science tells us, and there are a couple citations at the bottom there, which, again, this will be posted on my website tomorrow, and you'll have access to this PowerPoint as well as the links and all that good stuff. So people vote on shared values and moral leadership. And recent studies have actually shown that those societal values change, and that shared values are critically important to how people vote, more so than, in fact, specific issues or facts. So my experience, along with a lot of other people, have shown that, in fact, what Dems do is rely very largely on a factual argument. That's going back to this idea of debunking myths. And I'm presenting this as an example here of typically what Dems do. And I'm sure you can all relate to this idea of debunking a myth. On the screen there, I have some select talking points that were put out for President Obama's State of the Union address just a couple of weeks ago. And if you look at each of those quote-unquote talking points, you'll notice that those are all fact and issue related. That we made remarkable progress, and that's in terms of the economy. You have that when a Republican was in office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month, and then contrasting facts under Obama, et cetera, et cetera. Job growth, more people have health care, more jobs added, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure most of you have seen this. Now, if you saw that, and then if you watched the State of the Union address, what happened? Well, President Obama did a brilliant job of framing in the State of the Union. In fact, if you consider the factual talking points that were put out, and then you look at what was actually said in the State of the Union, it actually made the talking points irrelevant. Because President Obama didn't touch very much on those factual issues. He was framing a larger positive vision, and I have some examples right here in front of us. The first one was this idea of contrasting how conservatives think we should respond to change and how progressives should respond to change. Right? And he talked about responding, how conservatives respond with fear, turning inward, whereas he believes we should face the future with confidence in who we are and incredible things we can do together. That's beautiful framing, presenting a contrast in a positive, progressive way. On the economy, he talked specifically about how all of our lives are made better because of the public, which is what we all are together. Talking about what role the government should play in making sure the system's not rigged in favor of the wealthy, and how American people have a choice to make. And indeed, that's true. And again, providing a really well-framed contrast between conservative and progressive. Next, he talked about innovation, the idea of investment, And again, public providing for private prosperity. The idea of working with Congress to give scientists at NIH the strongest resources they've had in over a decade. And then the idea that for all of us, and for the people and families we can still save, make America the country that cures cancer. Right? This idea that our lives will be better because of what we all do together through the public. See, critically important because that's a stark contrast to the conservative view, which is get rid of government. Government is immoral, it has no place in private life. And then, of course, I'm keeping America safe. Again, starkly contrasting the difference. Saying that the world respects us for diversity and openness. Right? Those are values. And respecting every faith. And then contrasting, again, the conservative, that when politicians insult Muslims, that doesn't make us safer, it's just wrong. It makes it harder to achieve our goals, betrays who we are as a country. Right? He's contrasting this conservative hierarchy that puts, again, Christians over other religions, whites over non-whites, Americans over non-Americans, et cetera. This conservative hierarchy that dominates their frame. He contrasts that specifically with the progressive frame, which basically says that as a country, we are stronger together. Our diversity, our openness, our respect for others makes us stronger. Critically important. Finally, in the State of the Union, the most important thing that he talked about was what type of country we want for the future. And if you, those of you who are watching in Western Wisconsin, remember Senator Vinehouse's last senatorial campaign, her conversation was what type of state do we want for the future, right? So President Obama presented a positive, progressive vision for the future, which again had nothing to do with facts and figures about the economy. It was a positive vision that supports those facts and figures. For example, how our collective future depends on our willingness to uphold our obligations as a citizen, to stand up for others, because we're all here only because somebody somewhere stood up for us. And you could translate that as being through the public, because of the things that we provide for each other through the public. And then this idea that we have a responsibility to stay active in public life so that it reflects the goodness and decency of the American people. Critical, excellent, positive, progressive vision. So there are three key points that he hit on that I really encourage you to take note of that provided this positive, progressive vision of hope. Okay, the first one is that people are the government. This idea that government is some evil, terrible thing that's going to come and take away your guns and you need to be afraid of it and protect yourself from the government that conservatives are peddling is not the progressive view of government or the public. It's where we all have a responsibility for each other to protect and empower each other through what we provide. Secondly, is the idea that private prosperity depends on the public. And we're going to hear some great examples of that coming up in some videos. But it's this idea that private business, private enterprise, private innovation, the things that we depend on for our private lives also depend on the public, which is the things that we all do together for each other. And we wouldn't have the quality of life we have without doing those things for each other through the public. Critical point, which again conservatives completely deny. They completely deny this, and it's a place where they're really vulnerable. So the more we can say it and repeat it, the better off we are. Finally, is we need to start getting our vision of democracy, because conservatives want people to think that democracy is only there in order to provide personal liberty so they can do whatever they want without government oversight. Right? That's their idea of democracy. Okay? The progressive idea of democracy is this idea of shared responsibility. To act with empathy and expand freedom and opportunity for everyone. And again, there's going to be some great video examples of that. So, and contrast that with what conservatives say, and you see a very distinctive moral difference. And that's what we want to be talking about. And as many of you know, as running local campaigns, being involved with grassroots in the communities, is that you really aren't getting what you need from state or national organizations. And there's a reason for that. It's because the messaging support you get from them, it ignores the science of framing thought. Okay, it has over-reliance on facts and issues and polling, and there's more to it, we'll get to that in a bit. It also lacks the relatable shared values. That those top-level issues in the large national and state top-of-the-ticket campaigns, those issues don't always translate to your local and regional issues, right? And the final thing that I would argue that I think is verified by about 10 years of history is that there's no positive progressive vision for the future, as President Obama presented in his State of the Union. The current strategy that I would say most of you in local campaigns, local organizations, even at the county level, are victims of is this kind of a top-down messaging strategy, right? That says that the top of the ticket drives the message. And they rely on this debunking myth with fact strategy, which is, again, fatally flawed. And they also prioritize negative attacks, which leads to negation. And for those of you who don't know what negation means, think of Lane Costco, don't think of an elephant. And if I tell you, don't think of an elephant, what do? You think of an elephant, right? So don't think of Scott Walker as a job creator. What do? You equate unconsciously Scott Walker with job creator. And you reinforce that whole idea of him as a job creator. So I have an example of that. This is a perfect example because if you follow the news releases and the press releases and the blogs that the DPW is putting out right now, you're going to see that they're largely committed to attacking Ron Johnson because he is running against the top of the ticket candidate, Russ Feingold. Now, that's not to say that the DPW shouldn't support the Feingold campaign. They absolutely should. And in fact, it's critical for Senator Feingold to get Russ Feingold to get reelected. We need him back in the Senate. And there's probably a good chance he will for a number of reasons. But I would encourage you to look at this quote here that ran in a press release just before Christmas that perfectly reinforces the conservative frame, especially the section highlighted in red. Because what is this press release doing? It's saying exactly what conservatives believe. It's repeating their frame. And by putting it in a quote, right, they're trying to be clever, they're trying to be sarcastic. But really what they're doing is they're activating those ideas and reinforcing them in people's thought, right? That the federal government shouldn't be involved in granting student loans. Student loans have enticed students into debts, right? And he voted for a budget that eliminates the program entirely. While conservatives would want to eliminate the program entirely because it is a government program, right? And then this idea that college loans are pretty easy to get and students take longer advantage because college is a lot of fun, right? That's not even an attempt at negation. That's flat out stating the conservative values and the conservative beliefs in the press release. Why? Because they are relying on this debunking myths, flawed strategy and instead of communicating a positive progressive vision that Russ Feingold stands for. So I have two quick polls. So in thinking about that quote, I'm just going to open the poll here real quick. Let me. As soon as I get a poll open here, I'm going to have you respond to this. I probably respond with your mind is, do those attacks on Johnson that you see in the media on a regular basis, do they help your local campaigns? Do they help your local campaigns? Do they provide you with a message that will work in your local campaigns? And pretty much everybody's voted now. And right, and some of you said that you're not sure. So clearly, if you're not sure, then that's a problem. So, and Phil saying heard no DPW messaging against Johnson. So for those of you who, if you want to follow this, go to the Wheeler report, the WH. In fact, I'll type the. I'm going to type the name of it in the chat box. The Wheeler report is a great resource for people. They compile all the press releases on any given day, and they publish them within minutes of them being put out. So if you want to see press releases from every campaign, from every legislator that go out on a given day, from every organization, go to the Wheeler report. I think it's just the wheelerreport.org or .com. And you'll see everything put out, no matter what newspaper it runs in, no matter who it's from. So it's a great resource. So pretty much everybody voted no. We'll close that survey. Pretty much everybody voted no, and there were some people that actually said they weren't sure. So again, if you're not sure, then that's a communication problem. So I put up in this poll, so now we're going to start to pivot our frame, right? And you can vote for more than one here. In your community, what are the most important, here's pretty much the top 5 progressive values are on your screen that you can vote for, right? So what are the top progressive values that you hear people caring about in your communities? Is it empathy for others? Do people care for their community's well-being? Do they want other people to have opportunities for a happy life? Do they believe we share responsibility for our community's prosperity? Or is it just simply a we all do better when we all do better kind of thing? And there's no wrong answer here. This is to just get all of you thinking in terms of what are the shared values in your community? What do people think about? And this is something for you to just put in the back of your mind as we go through the rest of the presentation tonight. Take a sip of water there. Pretty much everybody's voted, and right now the lead is we share responsibility for community. Oh, now it's changed. Yeah. Okay. So yes, the lead is believe we share responsibility for community prosperity. Right now, that's really interesting because in terms of what conservative Republicans are doing, right? There's no thought of responsibility for community prosperity. So there's something that gives us a hint on what the messaging for us is. Just lost one of my earphones here. A second. Okay. So thank you for participating. That's a good. So we have equal representation, for empathy for others, care for their community, want people to have opportunities for a happy life. We had 2 people vote for we all do better, we all do better. And then the large majority was that we share responsibility for community prosperity. Good. So where do we start? So as I said, I want to start shifting our frame. So to do that, I am going to give you some examples of great framing from progressives that are either in campaigns now and have been, but because I want you to think in terms of those community values that you just noted from people you talk to and your neighbors, and what these values that are being evoked here, and actually what they're saying about issues, right? Because these are going to be about issues. So here we go. This is from Senator Chris Larson from Milwaukee, also running for county executive in Milwaukee in a very important election, right? And this is about the economy. So what he talks about is being committed to a future that invests in our neighbors and creates family-supporting opportunities in our local communities. Okay, that is a great progressive way of countering the whole job creation conservative need, right? Don't say job creation because there's no such thing as job creation. It's a conservative theme. It's a conservative framed phrase, right? Senator Larson talks about family-supporting opportunities in local communities, and then he points out that conservatives are using backroom favors, right, to reward those who are just their favorites and not everybody else, and return to our state's traditional values of rewarding our real profit creators, Wisconsin workers. Right? That changes the whole frame of, a living wage and what's going on in the workplace and with our economy to be about the people, the workers, the profit creators, not this idea of job creation and this conservative myth about how they should be the ones to have government out of their corporations and other lives so that they can create a job. That's a myth, right? This is a great way of, again, evoking those values, right? Community responsibility, wanting others to do well. Well said. So here's another one from Melissa Sargent, who's state rep from Madison. And this is about the bills that are aimed at, as conservatives would say, reforming food stamp programs and addressing fraud and abuse in food stamps. And that's such and such a thing. So look at the red. So she's saying that this is not an economic problem, it's a moral problem. Right? So right away she elevates it above the political and puts it in the moral realm. Right? That the mean-spirited bills, and I love her last line there, I believe in common responsibility for the common good. We cannot demonize our neighbors while Wisconsinites continue going to bed hungry all over the state. Good stuff there. So now I've got a brief video, which I'll pull up here. So this is Elizabeth Warren. Brilliant speech. It'll take me just a second to cue it up.
We are now 3 days into a completely unnecessary, completely avoidable Republican shut medical research. We all know how we got here. For years now, we've heard a small minority.
Sorry, a little context. So she's talking about, this is talking about the government shutdown from a couple of years ago that the Republicans staged. So this is going to be a brilliant framing of government and the public and a positive progressive vision of government.
heard a small minority in this country rail against government. When I hear the latest tirades from some of the extremists in the House, I am struck by how vague these complaints are. From their rhetoric, you'd think they believe that any time that we, the people, come together to improve our lives, that the nation is committing some terrible wrong. From their rhetoric, you'd think they believe that the government that functions best is a government that doesn't function at all. So far, they haven't ended government, but they have achieved the next best thing, shutting the government down. But behind all the slogans of the Tea Party and all the thinly veiled calls for anarchy in Washington, behind all that, there's a reality. The American people don't want the extremist Republicans' bizarre vision of a future without government. They don't support it. Why? Because the American people know that without government, we would no longer be a great nation with a bright future. The American people know that government matters.
Isn't that fantastic? I mean, I would love to hear some, local, even assembly people say something like that. That people in Wisconsin know that government matters to them. That we wouldn't be a great state without all the things we do together. So brilliant. Next one, Bernie Sanders. And if you're applauding, yes, feel free to applaud because these are really good. So the next one is Bernie Sanders. This is a segment from the debate here. I'm just going to have to get it forwarded to the segment here.
People in jail than any other country on earth.
The African Americans.
America love of President Sanders.
They ain't gonna like the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior on Wall Street. And that is why I am pledged, if elected President of the United States, to bring about a political revolution where millions of people begin to stand up and finally say, enough is enough. This great country and our government belong to all of us, not just a handful of billionaires.
So the reason Bernie's little clip there is so good is because he's saying that the people are the government. Right? That this is what we all do together. It's not just for a handful of billionaires, which is why his message is resonating so well with so many people. So the next one is Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is the newly elected Prime Minister of Canada, and he won in a very unexpected landslide in which progressives took a majority of the Canadian government. It was very unexpected, and he did so by framing brilliantly and very, very much consistently presenting a positive reservation for the future. And this is from his acceptance speech
You did.
when he was elected, a segment of it. And again, I'll just have to fast forward here a little bit.
Canadians have spoken. You want a government.
So you're going to hear him evoke his positive vision and who he thanks for being elected. This is very important because he made this.
You want a government with a vision and an agenda for this country that is positive and ambitious and hopeful. Well, my friends, I promise you tonight that I will lead that government. Have faith in your fellow citizens, my friends. They are kind and generous. They are open-minded and optimistic. And they know in their heart of hearts that a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. My friends, we beat fear with hope. We beat cynicism with hard work. We beat negative, divisive politics with a positive vision that brings Canadians together.
So how about that? Right, with a positive vision for the future that brings Canadians together. Right, that's the kind of thing that will get people to vote. So, last question here for polling. It's your turn. So, I'm guessing this is going to be a no-brainer, but in the last 5 slides that you just saw, did you see or hear a message that relates to your community values? Right? People from all over, from Milwaukee, from Madison, from Vermont, somebody running for president, from Canada, from Massachusetts, right? You didn't hear about specific issues, but did you hear something that relates to your community and your values that you could hear one of your candidates say? And pretty much everybody's voted. And Munster is a common responsibility for the common good, absolutely. And if you all want to type in something specific, I'll end the voting because clearly that was kind of a softball that I threw out to you all there. So right here are the core progressive values that they hit on, that each one of them hit on. And these are the 3 components that I think you should all keep in mind. First of all, people are the government. And that means we have responsibility for each other to protect and empower everyone. Right? Private prosperity depends on the public. And the idea of democracy being shared responsibility to act with empathy and expand freedom and opportunity for everyone. Those are very different values than conservatives say. And you don't hear progressives say that. So, from our group participating en masse in Western Wisconsin, they sent their top local issues, and they really boiled down to kind of 2 big things here. The first one is the need for transparent, responsive, and responsible local government. And the second one is that corporations, and in their specific case, the sand mining corporations and the sand mining interests, are receiving special treatment. That is, profit is being put over people and nature. And that pretty much surmised what they saw as their local issues. And I think that we have people on from southern Wisconsin, from eastern Wisconsin, from the Fox Valley, from northern Wisconsin, obviously western Wisconsin, people on from all over tonight. I think you can all relate to those issues. So we're going to start thinking now about how you apply what we just learned in terms of those messages and those progressive messages to your community issues, your community campaigns. Okay. Before we do that, I'm going to play a brief segment. Some of you who know me have heard this, but Simon Sinek is a brilliant ethnologist and entrepreneur who came up with this start with why. And what framing does is it really empowers you to communicate the why about your issue, and that is, why should people care? Why should people care about your issue? And I'm just open the video. Okay, so Simon Sinek is going to inspire you as only he can to communicate the why. And I just need to find the spot here. It's about.
So where do you start when
hours, et cetera, people were bad. They sent out no invitation of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of
15. Okay, so just to set this up quickly, now that I've got it queued up. So he's going to talk about a successful example of what I would argue is this concept of framing and how it inspires people. And again, relate this to our topic tonight about community campaigns.
In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad, but he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are two types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders.
It's a bit of a longer clip than I would usually play, but it really gets the point across because this idea that Martin Luther King, he had a dream, not a plan. And he gets to that last point there about how politicians come up with their 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anyone. I think that's incredibly true. We've all seen that from experience, right? So let's take that, right, and let's start with this idea, right, that you're all in some type of local community, either at the county level, city, town, whatever it is, right? And morally, there are these fundamental responsibilities that those local governments have, right? To provide opportunity for everyone, protect and empower everyone, and that they're public servants, right? And they have a charge. They have a responsibility to ensure the future of the community for everyone. Right? You start with something like that and then tell people how and what your opponent has done, your conservative opponent has done to violate those moral tenets, that moral responsibility. Right, so let's start with that. And what I'd like to do is open up this whiteboard. If it will open for me here. So there we go. Okay, so the whiteboard is up, and I'm clicking on collaborate. So, just as an example, so okay. And you can just do, I actually did header there. If you go up to the style, you can click on text so it doesn't take up as much room. And I have green. If you want to type something in there, maybe just click on the color, change your color. Oh, and the whiteboard should load for you momentarily. And there's, you have a pencil, you have an eraser, you have text, and there's some fun shapes and things like that. And the other option is the chat box also for sharing ideas, as I can also download those. So that's a possibility there. Oh, and if you're having trouble, if you actually click on the text button, the capital T, click on that, and then click on the whiteboard. There we go. Mm-hmm. And the need for transparency needs to be framed in terms of public responsibility. And if you notice, conservatives tend to talk about government transparency also. And what they mean by transparency is let's find out who's disciplined so that we can punish those who aren't. So with progressives, we did talk about transparency in terms of this idea that the public has a responsibility to protect and empower people. So frame it that way. And I like the idea of bringing a diverse population together to create the best state. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And priority. There's a bunch of stuff in the chat box. Hold on, let me just catch up with that real quick here. And yeah, Anne wrote, everyone has untapped potential. In the chat box there, government needs to provide freedom and opportunity for people to create the future they dream of. That's a really good one. I encourage you, and especially for your group in the Fox Valley, Melissa Sargent and Chris Larson today released a bill that would provide basically college tuition for public university students in Wisconsin. And it was framed very much like that. The idea that, look, if kids are drowning in debt after college, they don't have the freedom to basically, pay forward what they've learned, and we all lose if that happens. And Phil, that's really interesting because, in a lot of municipalities now, the legislature has instilled this idea of fiscal discipline, and there are fiscal rewards for municipalities that maintain this idea of fiscal discipline. And so that is obviously strongly in the conservative frame. The way to pivot out of that is, instead of talking about fiscal discipline, to talk about responsibility for the people, for the things that the community provides so that people can be happy. And that if you don't have the investment, if you don't have the revenue and investment in a tax base to do that, you are robbing people of those opportunities. So good. I'm just going to keep that there so I remember to, and hopefully this sparks your brain, but what I want you to notice is that when you're framing it that way, it provides you the foundation for any issue. Right, so think of all these things, if we go back to the whiteboard, that were responsible for providing, all of these resources and investing in each other. Again, the idea of government responsibility to be transparent so that it serves the people. Providing opportunity to a diverse population and all of us working together. Right? If you look at all of those things, that's not just a single issue, is it? And I have an example here on education, right? You could say the things that we talked about of what government does or what the public does in terms of education, right? Teachers in public schools provide opportunity and freedom for all children to learn skills and knowledge, protect and empower children, which schools do. Teach children what's possible in life, right? The idea of providing opportunity for a future that they dream of. And public servants ensuring the future of the community through the children, right? So that translates to every issue. And the point to all this, kind of to bring this home for all of you, is that when you effectively frame your issues like this, it amplifies your message beyond a single issue. So if you have an effective message, for example, for sand mining, it also works for education. It also works for good open local government. It also works for why we need infrastructure and investment in infrastructure. Right? Then it translates to other campaigns on other issues. Right? So you don't get the attacking Ron Johnson effect where it doesn't mean anything to anybody outside of the Find Bill Johnson campaign. Right? Now it translates to every other campaign that's being run in your area. It tells people why they should care about your position. Remember, the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Right? People will vote for your candidate, they will vote for you. Why? Because it matters to them. Right? They're not doing it for you, they do it for themselves because they believe it. Okay. The other important thing it does is it provides a moral basis for what your position is on facts and issues that counters what conservatives are saying. Right? Because you should all understand conservatives are kicking our butt, with a few exceptions, but overall, conservatives are kicking our butt because they frame everything in this moral conservative frame. And finally, it has the power to change how people perceive what affects their lives. And that's critically important, because right now conservatives have people thinking that the only thing that affects their lives is how low their property taxes are. Right? But there are things that we need to communicate that really affect people's lives. Right? And Phil, for example, what you just wrote is perfect, right? Right? Your local government, right, should provide opportunities to everyone because they serve them. And what kind of opportunities are being missed because of how they are operating? And then that's a betrayal of trust, right? So we need to change how people perceive what affects their lives, and framing does that. So we're actually right on time. I can open the whiteboard if you have anything you want to add in the last couple minutes here. If you want to type anything, if you want to ask a question, feel free. But I hope this has been good food for thought. And again, this is just the beginning. We have a long time to go till November, and this is a great opportunity to start changing. And the way we change is starting from the bottom up. Because how do you win an assembly seat? You win an assembly seat by winning school board seats and county board seats and municipal, administration seats, right? And then you win an assembly seat, and then you work on a Senate seat, right? And then you start making change in your state parties that can provide positive progressive vision. So there we go. Oh, I see people are still moving around the whiteboard, so I can keep that up for a bit. So just in closing, thank you all very much. You know where to reach me. I'm going to type my website in the chat box. There's that. My email address is this. And then for those of you who are new and are wondering more about framing and how it works, I'm giving a free Introduction to Framing webinar a week from tonight. Exactly a week from tonight, 7:00 p.m. It'll be on this same platform. If you want to attend, if you want to get more basics, send me an email, and I can send you an invite. On my website, I also have subscription information, which is how most of you are on here. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all on our webinar in a month. Thinking Points Journal comes out next week. And follow me on Facebook, Twitter. I have a lot more going on in social media now, so keep in touch. Thanks, everybody.